Hey everyone, Thyworm here, with the third episode of Solar Self-Found build reviews, where I am trying out a build in Solar Self-Found, see if and how it works, adjust it when necessary, and tell you my findings. Let's dive in. The third episode covers the Mamba Viper Strike Trickster by Mathil. Compared to previous builds by Jungroan, for example, this isn't a league starter at all, and neither is it necessarily SSF viable thanks to one massive prerequisite, Bino's kitchen knife. I dropped that thing twice actually, so I decided to have a go at a build that was very much optimized for trade. The Viper Strike of the Mamba deals massive poison damage, which you proliferate using Binos, and that is pretty much the build. Damage output is huge, but it is also squishy, so somewhat of a glass cannon. I am only level 93, but I have done a ton of endgame content, primarily very juiced content, so you have tons of monsters next to each other, which helps with the proliferation. I've also had a great time farming some maven witnessed bosses. I've set up my heist for this league with this character because it's fairly fast and has good movement speed, and last but not least, it does very well in Simulacrum until you hit the bosses without any minions surrounding them because single target damage isn't the best. I think it will also thrive in Blight, but you are melee, so that is a bit of a downside. You might get hit and die. Let's dive a bit deeper into the core of the build. It is not very complicated, fortunately. Offensively, there are three layers to any build: flat damage, increased damage, and multiplicative damage. Flat damage comes primarily from your weapons, but also from the flat added chaos damage support gems. It's rather straightforward. I'll cover some of the items I crafted in another section. Then let's move on to the multiplicative damage, for which the build relies on the Power of Agony keystone, which makes damage over time multiplier equal to crit strike multiplier. So if you have 462 critical strike multiplier, like me, you also have 462 damage over time multiplier. The downside is that you don't deal extra damage with crits anymore, and non-critical strikes don't inflict ailments. This does mean, of course, you absolutely need to be crit capped or the build is going to feel horrible. To help you out with that, you get some crit nodes on the tree for starters. You also get the Ungul's Harmony, which provides tons of crit chance, and ideally you craft your weapons in such a way that they have high base crit chance. Finally, we buff our crit chance by using Ambush for a plus 25% crit chance, which I think is additive, so that means you pretty much always crit when you are using Ambush. Whatever you do, make sure to reach 100% crit chance. Still, your hits can be blocked, I feel, or for other reasons don't hit, and when that happens, you're basically dead. Clearly, you also need to reach 100% chance to poison, which isn't hard because Viper Strike is 60%, the passive tree is another 25%, and the Herald of Agony is yet another 20%. You can get poison chance on gloves as well with an Eldritch implicit and with rune crafting in King's March, so there are plenty of options. That covers Perfect Agony. Then we look at our main skill, Viper Strike of the Mamba. Quality on this gem adds more poison damage, so the more quality the better. And then both the hit damage and the damage over time are supported by support gems. I managed to find a good number of awakened support gems at this point in the league, although they are mostly still level 1 and 2. That leaves us with the third part of the damage equation, increased damage. This almost exclusively comes from medium cluster jewels, which have the chaos damage over time passives. One of the notables on these cluster jewels is called Low Tolerance, and it gives 300% increased poison damage if the poison is inflicted on an enemy that isn't poisoned. That is basically always if you inflict poison, as your Viper Strike Mamba prevents you from poisoning an already poisoned enemy. Mathil has 6 of these medium jewels, using 2 voices clusters. I managed to get 4 medium jewels in my build, as voices are not easy to get, of course, in SSF. The medium clusters are easily farmed, I feel, and quite common. Plus, you can use the 5-to-1 cluster vendor recipe to get a random medium cluster for 5 other medium clusters. And then for defense, this is a much shorter story because there's really not much there. I've been dying a lot on this character, actually. Your only source of defense is spell suppression and evasion. You're also CI, so you use energy shield only, and you are chaos damage immune. You don't have block because you wear 2 daggers, because that's double damage with Viper Strike. You don't have armor, you don't have any charges really, although you could, maybe on a ring, at least in maps. You're a glass cannon, and to be fair, that doesn't feel all that amazing. I personally prefer more well-rounded builds, but the upside is absolutely there, because the poison damage, even in SSF with subpar gear, is massive. Mathil's video doesn't specifically have pros and cons, so let me share my observations, starting with the pros. 1. I mentioned it, but the damage is bonkers, even in SSF. It's easy to skill, and around level 70 I was clearing tier 16 maps. Sure, I keep dying, and I'm mostly level 93 as a result of it, but the damage is undeniable. 2. Next to the damage, there is something incredibly satisfying about seeing the poison proliferate pretty much endlessly, as long as there are enemies around. And in super juiced 80% delirious maps, there are always enemies around, meaning all you do is just hit once and run and see the mayhem unfold before your eyes. You don't get that with many builds. 3. The character is fast, which is fun. I think this is a decent delver and a decent heist or lab runner. 4. It's one of the few builds I could find for Bino's kitchen knife, so if you have this weapon in SSF and you want to use it, you might as well give this a go. I think it's possible to make this much tankier, however, I just didn't bother at this point. Then some cons. 1. It is not tanky at all. I've died often, so I just ended up using Cast on Death Portal, and there's nothing wrong with that, at least I don't think so. Just don't expect to reach level 100 without making this character much tankier. 2. Single target damage isn't great, and you would be better off with another weapon than Bino's for bossing if you attempt to do that with this build, which I mostly skipped. 3. The playstyle itself. It's sort of difficult to put this into words, as playstyle is first of all subjective, but most of all hard to translate if you are not actually playing. Despite having 100% chance to hit and 100% chance to crit, I still often find myself not hitting, or my attacks are getting blocked, or I'm getting stunned, and once you miss that first hit that destroys the screen, the monsters hit you and you are dead. I have massive stun recovery as well due to immutable force, but still I feel like I'm getting interrupted a lot, and I'm just not like super excited about how this build turned out in the end in terms of playstyle. I'm listing a few preparations you need before rolling into this build. Clearly you need Bino's kitchen knife, because without it you do not have poison proliferation and it's not working. There are some other items you may find handy to collect in advance, however, which are 1. Bino's kitchen knife, once more. It's farmable using div cards, by the way. 2. Ungil's Harmony amulet for an easy crit cap. This is a random drop. 3. Darkness Enthroned from killing the Abyss bosses. Inside that well-rolled Darkness Enthroned, you want jewels with tier 1 accuracy to cap hit chance. 4. 2 medium Chaos damage over time cluster jewels with low tolerance, just to get you started on 600% increased damage. That is what I had, and it goes a long way. You can upgrade more later. Leveling and progression isn't really a factor because this isn't a league starter, so you can level in any twink way you like. I used a rain of arrows and a bunch of twink gear. I also had a few pieces ready for this character and swapped around level 65 or so and progressed from there.
Small self-plug, check the description for Google Docs on all my SSF stuff, account name, POBs, atlas trees, etc. There's a Discord link in there as well. I have a guild, Thy Guild, feel free to join in game. And don't forget to subscribe, guys. Okay, back to the video.
Let's discuss some of the alterations I made to the build in SSF, including the reasons why. Starting with the passives. Mathil has 2 5-note passive voices, which you won't get all that easily in SSF. It allows him to have 6 medium cluster jewels with low tolerance. I don't have any voices, so I had to make some changes. I decided to instead go for 2 large cluster jewels, so I could fit 4 medium cluster jewels in with low tolerance. I don't think it matters all that much which large cluster jewels you take, but I took Chaos and Daggers. Getting accuracy is a bit of a challenge, and as I was doing a lot of simulacrums, I found a bunch of split personalities, and I equipped one of them, giving me another 210 accuracy and a bit of energy shield. To get some more additional energy shield, I am using this small cluster jewel. Would I gain more levels, I would pick up the nodes towards an additional curse, so I can apply both the Spare and Alchemist's mark on the enemy. For skills, I made 2 changes. The first is Cast on Death Portal, and the second is to automate Phase Run and Withering Step. It synergizes with the Wither totems you have, plus it provides a ton of speed, plus I felt that Whirling Blades, which Mathil has, also poisons the enemies, which isn't what you want because then you can't poison them anymore with Viper Strike. I'm personally not entirely sold on the Herald of Agony. I don't need it anymore for the poison chance on hit, I'm capped even without it. It does give 10% more poison damage, but I already have like 600% more damage with ambush. Maybe slotting in another aura isn't a bad idea. Something a bit more tanky, who knows. Otherwise, I didn't change much. Let's go over the gear. So you see what I managed to gather in SSF and what the build looks like as a result. I think the gear is a decent indicator for SSF viability after all. The main weapon, that's Bino's, that is a prerequisite. The offhand weapon I crafted myself using a few mechanics. First I used alteration orbs on 2 different weapons to get a good prefix. Then I multi-modded both those daggers and I made sure I used named modifiers because these won't stack with recombinating. Then I recombinated them into a dagger with the prefixes that I wanted. I then removed the crafted modifier, crafted prefixes cannot be changed, rolled crit on the harvest craft and got 15% global crit multi, which I thought was good enough. There's a risk of filling that last prefix, which I didn't want to do, so I was happy at this stage. Then I crafted prefixes cannot be changed once more and slammed it with a veiled orb, as you can see here, hoping to hit that open prefix and not remove the crit multi, which is exactly what happened. And then I'm hoping for the one of the massive fizz rolls, which is also exactly what I unveiled. I then finished the weapon by crafting crit chance, putting on quality, and rune crafting chaos damage is lucky. And I have no clue if that craft is doing anything for my build. Let me know in the comments. I'm not that great at crafting yet, so I was quite happy with the result personally, but I'm taking any advice on this, so feel free. For the rings, I had the fractured bases and spammed Shrieking Essences of Scorn, which gives crit multiplier on a ring. I then just finished both rings with the bench craft, some extra energy shield. The belt is a well-rolled Darkness Enthroned with really bad jewels. Only the accuracy does anything for me here, so this is by far the weakest point in the gear, but I've just been too lazy to upgrade it. For now, it works. The rest of the gear is just the highest available evasion energy shield base items, and I mostly use harvest crafts with defense to get the results you see. They're okay pieces of gear, but they could definitely be better, and that would also likely make the build a bit tankier. For flasks, I'm running a Cinder Swallow for the fun and energy shield on kill, which isn't bad actually, and then fairly standard stuff, meaning evasion, crit, movement speed and phasing. Let's draw a conclusion. Mathil's build in SSF isn't great and primarily lacks some balance, in my opinion. It is way up on the damage scale and it is fun to see multiple screens pop with poison in an instant, but it is also quite squishy and that started to annoy me a little bit at the end. I would say it is fixable, the squishiness, to an extent, by better crafting, more farming, etc. But it will never reach that well-rounded status of a build like Power Siphon Mines, which I've kept playing for the most part. Send me any suggestions though, what you want to do with this trickster. I think I'll turn it into a completely different build, so I save myself some leveling hours. I have no clue what build yet, however. I hope you'll learn something, that you see how I tried to adapt the build to SSF conditions. I'm sure I've made a mistake here or there. I'm not great at making builds, I never claimed I was. So please point out those mistakes. That would be super helpful, so I can improve my explanation of builds that others make. I hope you had a good time watching this episode. Let me know what you think. Also, let me know if you have any suggestions. Subscribe and like for more PoE SSF content. Thanks for watching and making it to the end. Love you all. See you soon. Bye bye.